Thank you so much, Tony, for that wonderful introduction. Probably a little bit too pumping up for me, as the main presenters here are so incredible, and we're so excited to be here with you today and kind of walk you through our talk tracks. I've got Gabby Thurman with us. Gabby was previously on our CSM team. Last September, she had an incredibly beautiful baby girl, and she's transitioned over to our renewals team and has tons of exciting stuff. Gabby, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit?
Yes, as Paige mentioned, my name is Gabby Thurman. I was a CSM team lead for a few years, and then after having a baby, I transitioned to renewals team to kind of get a different scope of the line as a client goes. I'm originally from Arizona, and I've been at Awardco for a few years now, and I love it. I'm excited to be here and kind of just talk more about leadership and how we can get leadership buy-in, which is very important, I especially think this time of year.
Thanks so much, Gabby. And then we also have John Richards, who is the Chief Financial Officer here at Awardco, and one of everyone's favorites across the office. He has worked with companies like Google, Cisco, Domo before coming to Awardco, and I'll just pass it over to you, John, to introduce yourself a little more.
Thank you, Paige. I'm really happy to be here. Grateful to SHRM for the platform. Honestly, I've been in finance and accounting leadership for a while. Not that I've necessarily done it well, but I've seen the good and the bad of that, so I'm excited to talk about that today.
Thank you so much. We're so excited to kind of dive into this leadership buy-in topic, and we kind of want to level the playing field here to kind of outline that Awardco is a recognition and rewards company, and so often the talk tracks that you'll hear today, we're kind of centering around recognition and rewards in organizations, but we truly believe that this content can be applied to any initiatives or strategic things that you are working on within your organizations, and how to get that buy-in from not only your managers and your senior levels, but from executives and everyone across the organization. So kind of diving right in, what makes a great leader? John, I'm going to pass that one to you first.
Well, what I'd really like to hear is what Gabby thinks is a great leader, but I'll start us off and tell you what I think. I think a great leader needs to be somebody that people want to work with, want to follow, maybe want to work for. I think there needs to be a personal connection. I think there needs to be really good communication and trust in both directions. Maybe the best way I can describe that actually is a good leader to me is somebody who passes off the credit to his or her team when there's credit to be given, and perhaps takes all the blame when there's blame to be handed out.
I love that, Gabby. Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think kind of, even though he just stole everything, that's good, right? Something that I always liked is people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's something I've valued in a leader. I think someone who's humble and who shows that they care about the people they're leading, right? Because you want to follow somebody, even if you weren't a leader. I think that's kind of what makes a really good leader, plus with what John mentioned as well.
Yeah, John, is there anything specific from what you just mentioned? Is there any personal experiences that you've had with a leader that either you had or someone you've been able to mentor that's kind of helped cement those ideas for you?
That's a great question. Let me talk about a friend I used to work for. His name is Bruce, and he was a CFO, and I worked for him for many years. Bruce knew I had aspirations to become like him someday, and so he would provide me with the opportunities to really learn by doing what he does or what he did at the time. He challenged me, he pushed me, he helped me to set goals for myself, and did so from the perspective of somebody who'd been there and done that, always giving me feedback, but mostly really the opportunity to do things that were outside of my comfort zone, and really preparing me well for my current job.
I love that. I think it's cool as you grow in your career to be able to rely back on past experiences to kind of see how they've enabled you along your path. As leaders, I'm sure that many people on this call are either leaders in their job titles or you're leaders just in your life, in your family, whatever it is. I think we can all level set and understand that leaders do have a difficult job, especially in the economy and in the current climate. Obviously, we're kind of a few years past the pandemic, and yet we're still seeing an all-time high in resignations. We're still looking at 4 million per month in 2023. And then also we're experiencing inflation, burnout, productivity is down across organizations according to GDP. And so with all of these challenges in the workplace, it can become a little bit disheartening as a leader to be able to know what to do and what's the most effective way to approach that. So when you are looking at these kind of stats and you understand this, what stressors have you guys seen in the HR teams that you've worked with or the companies that you've heard about? What are the current stressors and the biggest causes of concern for teams right now in this environment?
I can go first if you want, John. I think from what I've seen as my time as a CSM, a lot of it was turnover, right? A lot of people are either leaving their job, or there's no budget for recognition, or there's no budget for employees, right? We're seeing that a lot happening. So I feel like that's one of the big stressors. And a lot of the people are wondering, well, what can we do? And I've seen that's been successful is just remembering about the person, right? Making them feel like a person, not an employee. That's kind of helped a lot of companies, and a lot of the admins that I worked with kind of just had to take a step back and think of that and say, okay, COVID was one of them too, right? That you mentioned. They kind of had to take a step back and say, we need to reimagine kind of the wheel, because what we're doing right now isn't working. And that can be very stressful for people because we've never experienced a pandemic. A lot of the things we're experiencing now, we just don't know about. And that's just kind of been one of the main things I've noticed.
I will just add that completely agree that one of the biggest stresses right now is making sure we keep the employees that we want and keep the people here working hard, doing well, and being engaged. There's a lot of anxious people, and keeping morale high, keeping them engaged in what they're doing is really important. I would say also in an economic environment like we are now, you have many companies that have gone through layoffs. You also have many companies that are pulling back on things like raises, limited raises, limited new benefits, and monetary additions to overall total rewards and compensation. And so it's really important to understand that these things are still important to the employees, even if a company in an economic time can't do maybe what everybody wants them to do. So those are definitely stresses we've seen in the last couple of years.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's interesting too, because even across industries, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, there's always something that HR leaders are facing specific to their industry or their company at a different time. And I think that's something that makes HR jobs so difficult, but then also so fulfilling, because you have this opportunity to create solutions for all of the variety of issues and problems that will pop up. I think that in kind of connection with that, I think the one thing that, regardless of the industry you're in, the people you're working with, or anything like that, there is a key indicator across leaders. There's probably several of them, but one we wanted to highlight today was that leaders want their employees to do great work, right? That's kind of the united cause across leadership, is that from executive level, they want their company to succeed, down to individual team members that are leading out a support team. They want their team to do great work and feel fulfilled in their roles. And so when you're kind of thinking about in that aspect, what should those priorities be as a leader to get your people to do that great work? What kind of priorities do you put at the forefront of your mind when you're leading a team to make them feel empowered?
I think for me, I like to get in their shoes a little bit, right? Because sometimes when you're in leadership, you kind of forget how it is to, do the day-to-day things and whatnot. So I like to think of myself in their shoes and kind of work backwards, right? Saying, okay, this is, as a leader or as a CEO or as whatever I'm over, I want them to do good work, which you mentioned, right? And so kind of just working backwards and saying, what motivates me, and understanding the people you work with too. I know that X, Y, and Z motivates this group of people, and you can't make everyone happy at the end of the day. But I think understanding how people work really is a tool for you to know how to help people succeed. And I know this is all about awards and recognition, so you'll hear me say that a lot, but that really does just kind of a little pep in their step really works, and understanding how they work and just kind of saying, if I recognize them, can that motivate them? As an example.
That's a perfect answer. And I'll just add, if we're able to clear some of the obstacles for them to do their job, right? Are we training them well? Do they have the right manager? Are they in the right team? Are the processes okay? All those things are important for a company. But keeping them happy and fulfilled is just as important. And the rewards and recognition strategy, however it's done, is very critical there, as it can make a whole difference between their attitude in helping overcome those things or feeling like the weight of the world is on their shoulders.
Yeah, I think that's it's interesting too, because I feel like when you're looking at leaders, I think that oftentimes leaders can feel siloed or like they're on their own island because they're looked to like be the ones with all of the solutions. And I think it can often get lonely there, right? Of like feeling like this intimidation that you need to understand and provide solutions for all of your team. So kind of like from that context, John, what would your advice be to a leader in these certain economic times? Like what would your advice be to them about how to lead effectively and meet the needs while all of the employees are experiencing some sort of anxiety?
For me, communication and as much transparency as possible is the best route to go. So for instance, communicating why there might be limited raises or why, we're not hiring a whole lot to build out, broader teams with more horsepower. We're not, maybe if we're not doing that, some employees may be like, well, they're just trying to hold me back. Or other employees might be thinking, oh my gosh, the company's going to go under. Well, probably neither of those is the case, but if the leaders aren't really transparent in why decisions are being made and what the impact may be and how they're going to help going forward, then it's a difficult thing to make sure everybody gets the message in the same way. So communicating transparently and clearly and multiple times probably is maybe the best approach that I would take.
Communication is the theme, I think, so often. So just kind of like throwing it out there, we'd love to get some feedback from our participants of what are your priorities when you're looking at your landscape, your job. What are your priorities as a people leader, and what are your priorities as an HR professional? Of what are you looking into to kind of really support your teams and get new ideas that way? And then we'll kind of dive into the concept of the disconnect that can happen between leadership and their team members, right? So we've got a few stats here to kind of start this conversation out. 53% of employees want better compensation, but only 26% of executives think employees want better compensation. I think there's a variety of reasons that this stat can be so distant across organizations. I think you often have employees who they don't want to give direct feedback they don't want to give negative feedback to leadership or executives. And so they'll sometimes like withhold some of that information. But I also think that there's just like, when you have an organization that's of all different levels, like you have so many different people working, you can't expect the executive to actually know every single thing that's going on in every single individual's life. Right? And so compensation being a topic that everyone is always wanting to talk about, but then also peppering in benefits with that as well, where we've got employee benefits and compensation that are always top of mind because it's why people come to work. So in thinking about this, what do you think are common causes of disconnections that can happen across leadership? Maybe Gabby, you take this one first.
Yeah, I really like what you mentioned about sometimes you might be a little too scared to give that feedback. You get the surveys and you're at the time, you're taking the survey and you're just like, often, somewhat there, whatever the answers are, right? Where it's like, how do you feel about this? And sometimes I think we're not as honest with that. So I think that is a big one. But I think another disconnect can be kind of going back to making sure they feel like they're cared about as an employee, right? And making sure that even though you can't touch every base of everybody, because you might have 6,000 employees or maybe more employees, right? So you won't be able to make everyone happy. But I think taking the time to kind of say, okay, let's take a step back, let's strategize, kind of what John said, right? Being strategic about what can I do for my employees to feel like I can't give them their compensation because of X, Y, and Z. However, I can do this. I can meet you halfway. I can see that this is a need for you. I understand this is something you want. Let's meet halfway and work together. And just being transparent, I think, can help to kind of meet in the middle.
John, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I actually do. And I'm actually kind of laughing because when you look at the makeup of our company and probably many companies out there, there's quite a young a workforce that's pretty young. And in fact, I'm probably one of the oldest people at the company. I prefer to call it experienced, but most people would call it old.
No.
This is one of the causes, I think, of some of the disconnects is what I call back in the day syndrome. So you get some of these older leaders, perhaps, that might say, well, back in my day, we had to do this, this, and that before we got to the point where we earned that raise or we got that recognition or that promotion. that's dangerous. Perhaps I really like what Gabby said, where it's maybe somewhere in the middle between what's expected or asked for versus what's earned. So understanding that back in my day doesn't necessarily apply to where we are now. So that's one thing. I think another great mistake that many executives make is they don't really, what I call, walk the floor. And I don't know what your company's setup is. I don't know if, even if you're remote, right? But what a good executive does, in my opinion, and I've seen this with others that I feel like are good executives, is they are walking around, saying hi to people, talking to people who are on the sales floor or the development team or the CS group or whatever the case may be, introducing themselves, getting to know them, asking about their family. We talk a lot about golf in the sales team, and I'm always there with it. And it's probably a waste of time, except that it's not, because we get to know the people and we start to narrow the gap between their expectations and my expectations.
Yeah, I love that, because I think there's a piece to that of like water cooler conversation, right? That is a term that's thrown around of sometimes those intimate interactions that you wouldn't have anywhere else can happen in a break room or in crossing paths with someone. And when you take that time to connect, I think that's that's why I have loved working at Awardco specifically, is I've had time to interact with every single member of the C-suite in passing. And it's been so cool to like make those interactions like slowly over time and be able to get them not only on a professional level, but a personal level as well. And so I think when you're, as a leader, the more you take time to empathize, and leader is about the people, right? I think oftentimes we get so caught up in like the decision making and the admin processes and all of the things that could potentially be on our plate, that you forget that you're there to support the team members that are under you. And what can you do? Like, your job is successful when they're successful. And so what can you do to empower those people? So curious on this, when it comes to, like, obviously we have this aspect of work that is transactional, because work started because people needed to come, make a living, be paid so that they could live and take home money for their families and all of that things. We're seeing a trend that's kind of interesting when you look at the data. So when we look at millennials, they're on average staying at companies for 2.8 years. For Gen Z, that's a little bit lower right now at 2.2 years as more data is coming out. And then you look at Gen X, and they're at about 5.2 years, and then baby boomers up to 8.2 years. And so we're seeing this downward trend in the amount of time and longevity that employees are staying at companies. And I think there's a couple things that can happen because of this. It's one, it can harbor distrust between employees and employers, because they feel like they don't have that same like level of like, hoorah, I want to stay with this organization long term. But then you have it on the other side where the employees want to be like, well, I want to be somewhere I feel valued and appreciated, and like I'm being paid for what I'm doing. And so there's this constant kind of dichotomy that you're experiencing on both sides of it. And so from your guys' perspective, how do you create a culture that expounds beyond the transactional relationships of work in its generic form, and how do you make it feel a little bit more empowering for your employees?
As a millennial myself, and proud of it, I love talking about this topic because I have seen it in my own personal life, right? And I understand exactly what you're talking about. I think a buzzword that we're hearing a lot is corporate America, right? And that negative like connotation when someone's like, oh, I'm in a corporate America, it's always like I roll, I'm stressed, and I'm worked so hard, And I think John hit it perfectly where he said he's had to talk a lot about golf, right? I don't even know if he plays golf. I know. Has to go to golf trips. I think I know I keep saying the word balance, and it's hard to get a balance, but it really is. I could have easily have left 2 years ago and said, okay, I'm a millennial, I'm a statistic. I've hit my 2 years at Awardco, see ya. I'm gonna talk what happened for me, what kept me here. And it's my coworkers, it's the leadership, it's the way everything's running, right? My anniversary, the CEO mentioned something about my anniversary. And how many companies say that, right? Where it's not a generic card that was signed and he just sends it to everyone. Like, he personally said something, right? A birthday. When I got married, I got a gift from our VP of the department, right? A personal gift given to me. When I had a baby, they sent me a recognition. I will never forget this, but it was a few months ago. We had like a little lunch, and I had to bring my baby with me. And I remember walking, and Steve, the CEO, comes and says, by name, how are you doing, Gabby? And that just stuck with me. It's that small little things that they remember me, who I am, and my experiences in my life. And so although Q4 can be very busy and it's all hands on deck situation, and there's been nights where I've stayed later than normal, you can say quote unquote corporate America, they care enough, they care about me, I care about them. And I think it's that small touches of being personable and caring, and I think as a millennial myself, it makes all the difference, and it makes me want to stay longer. I love where I work, so it's fun.
I think you make a really incredible point about personal relationships. I had an experience when we moved to a different state, took a different job, and I immediately jumped into that job and made friends in the workplace and had a great experience. My wife, who did more work than I do, but it was out of the home with our kids, she had a harder time making that adjustment because there were no, there were not as many interactions with coworkers that I had. And so we started to realize the importance of work. Yes, we went there because we were being paid to go there. But wow, I spent so many of my quality day, hours in a day with these people. It was really important to me to make personal relationships and make friends. And I think a big piece of that is recognitions. However it's done, however it's fulfilled, whether it's private or public, those are so important. And I know that's what we're talking about today. I just think we can't overlook that as a critical piece of getting past, I do this for you and you pay me money.
Yeah.
There's more to it than that in the workplace.
I think too that in that element as well, it's like when you feel like you're a part of an organization's like overall plan, and you're behind on their company values, I think we can't hit on those enough. I think oftentimes those just become something that are put up on a wall and forgotten about. But it's like when you can actually get your employees tied back to like the intrinsical values of good that your company wants to do, not only for their product or whatever their offering is, but also for their individual employees, then it's a game changer for them across the board. And I think that as we continue on, I think it's also about, like, as we've been discussing, like how we reframe that. And I think one of the biggest things that comes with reframing how work is viewed within your individual workplaces is how it's communicated from the top down. And so as we're having this conversation, just want to remind everyone again to go ahead and throw in any thoughts or questions in the Q&A, so that we'll ensure to answer those either as we go along or at the very end, depending on what the question is. But in terms of when we think about reframing and top-down leadership, John, specifically for you as an executive, what is like the biggest thing, what is the biggest piece of feedback that you would give to your either VP, senior level managers, or anyone who's coming to you with, hey, like a new idea, a new solution? What is your feedback in helping them understand what the priorities of the company are, and from your perspective, so that they know how to like reframe their needs to you?
Well, that's an easy one. As the CFO, a lot of people come to me and ask for, can we do this, or can I get that, or, what would it take here? And I always kind of boil it down to three things. So without putting a big bullet point list up there, here they are in basically. Do they have a clear explanation of why it is important? What value it's going to bring? What's the need? The second one is, have they looked at all the possible alternatives or different solutions that could work? And if they have, tell me why this one is the most important or the best way to approach the solution. And then as the CFO, again, I want to understand, at least reasonably, what could it cost, but more than that, what value can we get out of it? And can we pay it back, right? Can we pay it back quickly, or is it a long-term out expense? So it's pretty simple. How bad do we need it? Is this the best option? Does it meet our needs? And what's the value?
I love that. What do you think so say someone identifies those things, do you feel like there are like tools or some recommendations you would make on like how someone should present those solutions to you, be it the right time, be it the right location, having the right people involved? How do you kind of monitor those as well, especially with companies that are larger and like the CFO doesn't have time for everyone to be coming to them?
It used to be a joke that if you wanted to get something through at the office, you knew some days were good to ask because so-and-so was in a good mood. Other days weren't the right day to ask. So timing always is a factor. But I would say if you just are able to make a clear case for it, then we'll entertain it. You're right. There's going to be a lot of requests, and maybe they don't all boil up to the very top level. But if you go through your managers, which will help pare some down, go through your department heads and other leaders, they're going to understand these two fit within the priorities of what the company is trying to accomplish, whereas these others maybe not so much right now. So going through the chain of command. Not to say we don't have an open door policy, but it just helps to make sure everybody, all the way from whatever level is wanting the thing, all the way to the top, are aligned with the right goals and focus.
I love that. It reminds me of a story from one of our clients. They were looking at different service awards. That was their main thing that they wanted when they were looking at a solution provider, is they just had this one issue that they wanted to solve. They were looking for a new provider for it. So they're shopping around. And obviously with Awardco, we're big on recognition. And so monetary recognition is something we talk about a lot, but we also have service award offerings. And one of the admins at this company was really, really passionate about the Awardco solution and wanted that to be the solution. But her senior managers were like, I don't know, like we're mostly focused on service awards. We're not really bought into like the non-monetary recognition. We don't think it's going to have an impact. But she continued to push this. She put together a business use case and she compiled all of this data and research to kind of support her argument for this. And she went and presented that to them again and again. And they were so impressed by her like dedication to this and for her putting in the like work to like get the support and the data that she needed to support her solution, that they trusted her with it. They let her run with it. And the non-monetary recognition side ended up being the most impactful for their organization. And so I think that is just the definition of leaders that are able to listen to their team members. And obviously, like we as team members, we need to put that work in to show like, hey, not only do I think this is the right solution, but these are the reasons why. And then you can and then when you get the leadership buy-in as well, and you're able to push those initiatives forward, then it's so amazing to kind of see the fruits of those labors. And so I think that there's so much work to be done beforehand when you're looking at solution presentations, but I think that will be to your benefit in the long term and the short term, because it makes the conversations more productive and easier to have, while also enabling you to truly become an expert on that subject in your organization.
I'm not surprised at all that the non-monetary recognitions became the most important piece of what that client was doing, because that's what I've seen as the most impactful. That's not to say that the monetary piece doesn't matter, but really the recognitions on the non-monetary side, that's what creates the community. It's really cool.
It's interesting that such a simple concept, right? Recognition is something that just goes time and time again. Like that is what people want at work. When you hear majority of the feedback that you hear from employees, LinkedIn, everything like that, I think one of the most common things you hear is that people just want to like be appreciated for the work they're doing and have gratitude expressed to them. And I think so much we think about that from a leadership down perspective, and it's less thought about from the bottom up, right? Where leaders, executives, they're the same as every other employee, right? They want to experience recognition, they want to experience gratitude, and they want to be able to feel like they're having an impact for good within their organization and the lives of their employees. So I think it's kind of full circle when it comes to transactional work. It's transferable across everything, right? Like employees, companies, everyone truly does want the same thing on both sides. So kind of looking into more, a study by Gartner came to show that when we're talking about total rewards, I think that's obviously been a huge buzzword, especially over the past few years. And so we just kind of want to give our definition in terms of what we're talking about. And total rewards is the combination of benefits, compensation, and rewards that employees receive from their organization. So this includes things like wages, bonuses, recognition, workplace flexibility, and career opportunities. And so in looking at total rewards, how do you think of total rewards in your organization? Obviously, we're a rewards and recognition organization, but John, I'd love if you could pull any experiences from Google or Cisco that also helped you frame your definition of total rewards.
That's a great question. I would say that, the salary and bonus and benefits, that's kind of the baseline. And you get there and you always wish you had more, but you're there and you're willing to work for what you're being given. The broader piece really is the rewards and recognition piece. Let me give you an example. I was at a company and I was there for a long time. I hit 10 years, my 10-year mark. I'm thinking, wow, this is cool. I'm going to get recognized. I'm going to get something really cool for it. You know, the non-monetary would have been nice, but the monetary would have been great too.
After 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. I got an email that was canned from the CEO who I spoke to later, and he goes, I didn't even know I sent that. And didn't have any gift, didn't have any points or rewards, just kind of saying, hey, thanks for your loyalty. We care about you. I'm like, cool. Not so much, right? And so I have understood over time, especially after that, how just being recognized meaningfully, I will say, is important. And then the right thing at the right time is also very important. And that's a big part of the total rewards strategy to me.
I do have if I could add a little bit as well. I know before I worked at Awardco, I had other companies that wanted to do rewards and recognition, and we're so close to doing it, kind of like what John said, you know, where it's like they kind of did something, but it wasn't super meaningful. For me, it was I got a pen, which I love pens, but I didn't really need a pen, and I have tons of pens, and I can just get a pen anywhere. So it kind of didn't, I was grateful and I was thankful and I stayed at the job, but if they would have just a little shout out, like I liked better when they brought a cake for like a birthday. Like I felt more special when they were like, oh, we got crumble cookies to celebrate, right? Ever since coming to Awardco, like I said, it's day and night. It's just the small things, and not to backtrack, but even when you're talking about the non-monetary ones, there's times where I get recognized and there's points attached to it. Ask me how many points, I have no idea. I don't know how many points they gave me because my thought process wasn't, woo, Paige gave me 20 points because I helped her with this project, right? It's, wow, like they valued my work. And that right there changes my mindset to say, who can I recognize and what else can I do to show that I love what I do? Did I use the 20 points? They're probably still sitting in my wallet, saving for some sort of new house thing, but it's the recognition that impacted me the most. And I think seeing from other positions or other departments or organizations that I used to be part of, not having that is another thing that's kept me at Awardco for as long as I can. Like I want to be here for a very long time because I know they care. And even though there's no points attached to it all the time, sometimes it just goes over my head how many points I got. It's just the recognition.
Which is a really great point. In fact, I will say people watch their balance. I watch mine. I'm saving up for something. Okay, cool, awesome. And I love the points, dollar for dollar, right? But I feel like with the public recognitions, especially non-monetary or monetary, whatever the case may be, you start to see something different in the employee when they get recognized. Mm-hmm. You start to see recognition around the company, like, oh, Gabby's great. She keeps getting recognized. You start to see pride in yourself, in your team, and your team in you. Like, hey, I work with Gabby. This is awesome. You start to see even maybe more confidence and strength, and you just have a broader feeling of belonging is what my experience
100%,
is.
100%, yeah. And it's a ripple effect, right? I recognize John, Paige does something for John, and John's like, wait a second. I want to show gratitude to Paige. I'm in the business of gratitude is what I tell everybody, right? What do? I'm thankful all the time, right? And I do it out of work all the time too. Sometimes I'm at a restaurant, I say, oh, I would love to recognize them because they did so great. Yeah, of course I tip them, but I would love to just say like, thank you so much for going the extra mile on this. Do you have Awardco? But unfortunately they don't.
Yeah, so with the poll, we're having overwhelming responses of, yes, we do have total rewards in most organizations, which is really exciting to see those responses. And so I think that, especially as HR professionals, it's a constant game of what can we do to up-level and set ourselves apart from other organizations? How do we facilitate a culture that is not only inviting and inspiring, but it makes people want to stay. It makes people want to refer their friends, right? It makes people want to bring others into this workplace because of the impact that it's having on their individual lives. And so kind of diving into like how salary and benefits are expected and not rewards, I think this is kind of something that's now understood. As John kind of mentioned earlier, those are kind of the expectation now. What used to be a benefit like PTO and health insurance, those used to not be the norm, right? Those got introduced and became the norm. And so I'm interested to see over the course of the next 20 years how these new rewards and offerings that we see across the board happening now, how those will kind of be slated into this whole experience of these are expected. Now what's going to be on top of that? And so in thinking about that, how can total rewards improve employee engagement? I think that there's obviously a lot of data to support this on an individual company level, but why don't you guys talk a little bit individually and organizationally, how you think can impact team members and organizations?
I actually had a client who they wanted to, this was post-COVID, right? So people were still working at home. A lot of their workforce was either in office or remote. And they came to me at a quarterly business review and said, Gabby, this is our problem. We have people in finance, we have people in marketing, some are working at home, some are working in different states, some are working in the office. We're seeing a lot of disconnect. How can we bring them together? And that was where our brains had to start working, right? What's the problem, first of all, is what we thought, and how can we help them engage? And one of the things we thought is, let's think of like a campaign, something that's exciting, right? Especially since people are working remote, they just are used to it. We just had a pandemic. What is unique? So something that they did was just think of like a holiday that was coming up, right? So they actually rolled out a new program for Employee Appreciation Day, and it was only open for a week. Right? So it had that like, you can only do this for 1 week, and their recognition numbers just increased, right? Because they were all engaging with each other. So Sarah from marketing was recognizing someone in finance. They'd probably never spoken to each other before, but everyone was super excited about this new program, and they know they only had 1 week. And then someone in working remotely is recognizing someone from another department. And it kind of just, of course, it's just a name that you recognize and maybe you don't know them in person, but they were starting to engage with each other a little bit more. So when you do meet them in person, I can say, hey, I've spoken to you before. We were part of that campaign. Another one was for the holidays. A client called it like giving thanks. So it was just for like the Thanksgiving holiday time. And it was just a campaign of giving thanks to somebody, right? They called it World of Thanks, I believe. And that was a success too, right? It just kind of helped everybody. It was a short period of time, but it got everyone kind of rolling the ball of like recognition and engagement. And until this day, they're still pretty engaged. And you might have to do that once in a while, but I think it made all the difference on kind of bringing people together.
That's a perfect answer. I can't add anything to that. That was fantastic.
All right, I guess I'm done.
You can take your exit stage left. No, I love that. I think too that oftentimes we hear of total rewards and expect that if we have like a blanket solution that all of our employees will feel engaged. But I think as we continue to learn, like it really goes back to managers and being able to make their teams feel empowered. And I think one of the coolest, we have a client who they are in manufacturing and they have clients, their employees are on the road nonstop, right? They're always, so it's not a lot of face-to-face interaction because their employees are all traveling across the country and can be very remote. And so it was interesting, how do you create this like solution where these people can feel connected even though they're not actually seeing each other face-to-face? And I thought it was so cool hearing feedback from this client that as they continue to rethink about what their rewards offerings looked like, because these people could jump to any other organization that had the same exact job in the trucking industry and they can jump ship and go anywhere that they need to at any time. But they were wanting, their retention rates were going up because they were seeing that as they provided more rewards that not necessarily affected their bottom line in terms of they were having to output a bunch more monetarily as an organization, but they were simply leaning into those rewards of making people feel valued, recognition, safe places for them to like give feedback, and they saw that retention rate go up. And so it's interesting to see how oftentimes we think the solution always has to have a monetary value associated with it, when sometimes there are solutions that are non-monetary that are going to have a huge impact on you. And I think that as an HR leader or a leader in any department, when you can lean in and get creative and think about solutions that don't always have a financial aspect associated with it, you're going to be able to get buy-in from your leaders because you're presenting solutions across the board that it's not always like, hey, I'm going to need additional budget to be able to push any initiative along. When you're able to prove the validity of like, hey, there's actually some initiatives that we're going to incorporate that don't cost us anything, but we're going to show you the return it can have, then it could have a major impact for you as you're having those discussions.
If I could just, something just came to mind when you were saying that. That's a big ask, right? You're going to your finance person and saying, I need more money for
And they're
rewards.
all mean. They're all really hard to get stuff to.
And you're thinking they're going to say no, right? But because as an HR person, your mindset's more of a people, right? And I think sometimes in finance, not saying John's not about people, but he needs to be good at his job and think of the financial impact of the company, right? So as an HR person, you're thinking, okay, I know retention is at its all time, like it's bad. People are leaving left and right. I have to go to finance now and say, hey, can I have some more money for this? And they say no, and then you're put in the spot, like, what can I do? And I love that Paige talked about it's thinking outside the box. And I think the best solutions come when you think outside the box. Like I said, just having a campaign of some sort that's completely non-monetary. I had a client who, for Valentine's Day, such a small thing, it's so tiny. You know how like in school you used to like give people chocolates or like, I got them a flower and you're just like, oh, I got a flower from someone. They did kind of like a Valentine, but they did it through Awardco recognizing each other. So it's like you're giving someone a Valentine. It was only on for one day and it was a complete success that I didn't think of it. The admin thought about it. And I just remember thinking, this is genius because their numbers just up and they didn't have to ask their finance team for any more money. And it was probably the best thing they did for their company at the time.
I think that just reminded me too of, there's like that saying that people will, like you hear sometimes, especially on TikTok. I'm a millennial, so I'm on TikTok a lot more than I want to admit that I am. But there's this saying talking about how people don't leave companies, they leave managers, or that your manager has more impact on your mental health than your partner. There's all of these like statistical analysis that people will say to throw out there. And it's interesting to me that when you look at it in regards of like an employee-employer relationship, that you can have a significant impact on people's, not only their mental health, but their well-being and their work-life balance and all of those things. And so when you're looking at how do we not only increase satisfaction within the workplace, I think that they're tied together. As much as we want to talk about work-life balance of being like, a lot of the times I feel like that's taken as like being able to separate completely from work and just have your personal life, which there is that element, but also is anyone actually 100% able to do that in this day and age? Because we're constantly connected. People can reach us at any hour of the day. Like there's those elements. And so it's like, I think that for me, it's more about being satisfied in what I do and finding passion in my work so that when I leave, I feel good about the work I've done and I'm able to separate myself from that, not in terms of like, I'm not going to think about my job at all over the next 5 hours from 5 to 9, but more of, I feel so much satisfaction in both areas of my life that I'm able to find a natural balance because I'm putting my priorities where they need to be. So you'll see that with feelings of value, contribution, and usefulness. We see that in increased professional development when people feel inspired to continue to upskill and just being able to have better relationships within their organizations. And that transfers to being able to have better relationships at home. And I think benefits obviously play a huge role in that in terms of all of the different benefits you can have when it comes to therapy or health insurance, all of those things that can really have an impact on your individual employees. So when we're looking at that, how have you guys seen an impact of that for you individually when you're able to feel empowered at work? What makes it so that you're able to find that kind of balance that so many people are looking for?
I absolutely love this conversation. Once again, I'm a millennial, so it's all the trend on TikTok too, right? Like, how can we have that balance? I personally have witnessed this at where I work now at Awardco, right? As I mentioned, like I wear lots of hats in my work life, personal life as a mom, and how am I able to be a mom and be a working mom and be a wife and have a social life and have friends, right? I just feel like it's constantly getting pulled in one way or another. And Paige hit it perfectly where I'm passionate enough of what I do that it's easier for me to separate those two, right? I've been lucky enough that being a working mom has been so smooth for me here at Awardco, and not everybody gets that opportunity, but it's been a game changer for me where I know that I don't feel guilty when I'm at work and I don't feel guilty when I'm at home because Awardco has set it up perfectly for me, where I don't feel like if I don't do this now, I'm gonna get fired and I'm scared every day of like the Sunday scaries, right? Or my baby is an obstacle because I can't advance in my career. I think being able to find a place, or if you're in HR, finding a solution for for your employees of like, how can I make them feel passionate about what they do? And a lot of that had to be with rewards and recognitions. And you'll hear me say that throughout this whole webinar, because it really is just that small little change that makes all the difference. It's because of that I feel very empowered to be able to do what I do every day and not feel guilty about any of it. So I love it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think too, just tying up some of those elements that we've talked about, when it comes to total rewards, we understand that it can have a return on investment in a variety of ways, be that, as Gabby's mentioned, lower turnover, increased engagement. You can raise your profitability, productivity, all of those things across the board can kind of get raised as you think about this. And so in terms of the next little bit, I really want to focus this on executive level buy-in and how you're able to get that. We've sprinkled it across, but we'll talk about it in rewards and recognition, but feel free to use it, as I mentioned before, in any way that is currently your focus. So you're going to see a poll pop up, and it's going to ask you, how do you get buy-in for yourself? Are you the decision maker? Do you have to report to someone? Anything like that? Just kind of be thinking about what your approval process looks like for getting buy-in on your initiatives. So just very generically, obviously we've spoken a lot to how total rewards and recognition can have an impact across your organization, and we think that there's a lot of benefits to it. But I'm going to pass it to Gabby first, of what do you think is the most important element to get leadership buy-in for you? When you've gone to your managers, to your leaders, what do you think is the one thing you always focus on first?
I'm solving a problem that they either know about or they don't know about quite yet. I think being prepared, I love the story you mentioned about the client who kind of was prepared with everything. If I'm going to ask for something, I want to go with the mindset, this is how I'm going to save you time, this is how I'm going to save you money, and this is how it's just, you're solving an issue, right? So before everything, that's kind of what I think in my mind. What am I solving, and how can I present this to them that they're going to say, this is a no-brainer. Thanks for all the facts. Do it. I trust you enough to do it. So very simple.
Yeah. John, anything to add?
Yeah, especially as it relates to the rewards and recognition space or concept, man, it's really quite simple to me. If the leadership understands that their employees are literally their most valuable asset, and this is most cases for most companies, then it's really quite easy actually to get buy-in on total rewards and recognition. And so for me, it's like, let's forget about the dollars and cents for a second. Let's forget about what somebody deserves or doesn't deserve. Let's think about, how do we best treat our most valuable asset? And if the leaders understand that, it's an easy conversation from there.
I love that. And I think that hand in hand, we've kind of mentioned this a little bit, is speaking that language of the leaders. So being able to understand that, like John's mentioned a couple of things from his perspective of right timing, right? Like being able to understand like what the biggest business needs are at the moment. I think those types of things really help leaders to not only be able to level set and understand, because I think oftentimes we expect leaders to know everything that's happening all of the time. But unless we're willing to give them that information and provide what data we can't expect them to have all of the knowledge that we have in our brain. And I think something that I fall victim to a lot is I am a very passionate person, and I get really excited about the initiatives and projects I'm working on. And I think oftentimes I expect everyone else around me to be just as excited and jazzed about what I'm working on as I am. But that's unfair of me to have that expectation for them, right? Of they're not in the day-to-day, they don't understand like why I think this is going to have such a big impact. So until I'm willing to provide that information, we're doing a disservice to ourselves and to our leaders when we don't put all of it out there to make sure that we all have the same understanding. And then as well as speaking the language of budgets, because obviously I think budget is obviously like a word that scares a lot of people. It has a negative connotation sometimes because oftentimes things get thrown down because of, oh, budgets got cut or things like that. And John has obviously experienced this more than anyone. Being in finance, like you're the one that has to kind of like lay down that law. And so what are some tools that you would tell people to kind of like dive into to better understand how to speak the language of budgets and how to be prepared for those conversations?
Well, when you think about building a house, you're not going to go build a house without a blueprint. When you think about accomplishing this year, for instance, what we want to as a company, we're not going to do so without a blueprint, or also known as a budget. And so it's important to remember probably two things about a budget. So one, there's always flexibility in there. No matter what the finance team says, there's always flexibility. Perhaps there's some areas that we're over budgeted, where costs can be reallocated to something else that's equally or more important. There are times also when a department might recognize some cost savings that weren't anticipated, and there's extras. There's always extras. Yeah, there's always overages too in other places, but there's always flexibility in a budget. Thinking about it in terms of how do we get a rewards and recognition solution if there's nothing specifically coded for that in the budget? Well, just think about what costs it's going to save us, or where we're going to be better off because of that solution. So for example, if you have a certain attrition rate where you're having employees leave, what if you just had 1 or 2 or 3 people stay that may have otherwise left? You have, all of a sudden, you don't have the costs that are related to replacing that employee. You have the recruiting costs, the interview costs, all the time it takes to identify and evaluate and then choose the right candidates. And then you have months, really, of maintaining the productivity of that employee who already was trained, already was there, hopefully doing a good job, rather than them leaving and then you have to train somebody else new. You have lots of cost savings from maintaining or even enhancing productivity by engaged employees that are still there. So thinking about a budget, yeah, there's not a line item for a rewards and recognition solution, but there certainly are dollars that are allocated to replacing the people that are going to leave without a rewards and recognition solution that should really be thought of in the context of, well, let's just move those to the rewards and recognition solution, and then we're going to be better off because we're going to save that on the back end.
I love that. We actually had a question come through that's kind of in connection with this, John, that I want to throw out there. But Terry says, how do you deal with situations where the leadership might be a little bit tone deaf in sharing with employees how much the company made in dollars, and in the next breath telling the employees they need to dig in and take on extra responsibilities without that additional compensation? So any ideas there of, like, if you have a leader that might be difficult, that you're having a difficult time communicating with, what would be your guys' recommendations on how to overcome that barrier?
Man, I'm going to just refer to some of the things we've already talked about. So sorry, Terry, if you're looking for the silver bullet. For us, it's probably more about the management team effectively communicating why they're doing certain things and why they're saying, hey, things are going really well here, and we also need to tighten our belts here. Why is that the case? And so maybe a broader understanding will get everybody on the same page. The other thing that I kind of just think about often is employees need to have a forum for which they can share their opinions with executives. We have a very open door policy with our executive team here, and I would hope that would be the case elsewhere. Employees need to be empowered to speak up and to ask questions, and then they must listen, and then they must repeat it. And it's just this cycle of human interaction that I hope works even between employees and executives. But the best thing I can say is communicating better on both sides is probably the best way to approach that.
Perfect. So to kind of summarize, we're coming up here on time. So one of obviously the biggest things that we want to get across is that you can't afford to not invest in employee engagement. And there's a variety of ways to do so. And so in understanding the ROI of total rewards, it's also about making a plan. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway that we can all have from this is it's all about the preparation beforehand, reframing how you and your organization views transactional work, but then also diving into how you rethink about total rewards or the work that you're specifically working in, as well as speaking the language of leadership and speaking the language of budgets. So before we get to any other questions, I wanted to just throw it to John and Gabby if you guys had any last minute thoughts that you wanted to share.
You want to go?
Sure. I think just remembering, I know we've covered a lot, and I know it's easier said than done, and when you're planning everything, you're like, how can I do it like they said it, right? But I think going back to always remember the why behind everything. I love that John has touched transparency multiple times during this, and I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind is be transparent with your leaders, and hopefully they will be transparent back, right? Respect, it goes both ways. So I think just kind of remembering the why of rewards and recognitions. Why are we doing this? Why do these employees matter? I think that kind of just trickles on, and you'll find the solutions moving forward.
That's great. So I'm going to get out of the box a little bit for my kind of closing thought. I used to coach a lot of sports, and there was a kid on one of my teams who always worried about looking good. I said, "Why are you so worried about that?" And he said, "Look good, feel good, play good, coach." And so let's think about that in terms of our work life and actually our work life balance. So you look good, meaning you take care of the things that are important to you. Mm-hmm. Then you feel good and you get recognized for it, and you play good because you have that increased confidence, and that goes through every area of your life. So look good, feel good, play good.
I love that.
Retweet.
Always ready for a sports analogy at the moment. Perfect. Well, we are so grateful for all of your time and for taking time out of your busy schedules to kind of listen to us talk around this topic today. I know that there were a lot more questions that came in and we're coming up on time. Feel free to reach out to any of us on LinkedIn. We're more than happy to carry on this conversation with you, provide any stats or anything like that you're looking for. So make sure to make those LinkedIn connections. We're happy to talk more. And Tony, we'll pass it back over to you.